Well, let's bring in our panel of parliamentary press gallery colleagues who are following the twists and turns of the campaign. Susan Delacourt is a columnist and parliamentary bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. And John Ivison is columnist for the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Postmedia. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Let's talk about the Liberal platform launched on the weekend in the context, if I can, of the whole affordability issue. The party said this was going to be the #1 issue, and now it seems to me they're tripping over each other to try and put more than everybody else in the window. And I guess I'm wondering who you think is winning the affordability challenge here to try and win voters.
Yeah, who's bought the Canadian public best? I think right now, I don't think I'd declare a winner yet. I think it's definitely an auction. They are a bidding war to see who can get them. The thing about the platform I read through yesterday was how much it struck me as almost like a budget, you know, or a throne speech, which they never got around to delivering. It was very bureaucratic, not at all like a campaign document to me. It read more like what you put in a wish list for a throne speech, if you just figure you're still government. Right.
What do you think, Joël-Denis?
Well, if you look at the polls, I agree with Susan. You can't declare a winner and who is winning the affordability debate. The Tories had decided back in January that they wanted to be the theme of their election campaign, affordability, and Justin Trudeau, the Liberal leader, in June said he wanted the election to be a referendum on climate change and who's best suited to fight this. And so you can see, though, that the Liberals have moved a bit towards the affordability thing because they know that might be more winner for them than fighting only an election on climate change. So they want to do both, but they're clearly moving more towards the affordability thing. That has been, I think, the one that the Tories wanted to impose in this election.
When your slogan, John, is "It's time for you to get ahead," which the Conservative slogan, that focuses people to look at what's on offer. And when you see what's being rolled out by the different parties, it's like, how, if you're a voter, what's the answer to that question? Who helps you get ahead?
Well, it is an auction on. Advanced auction on stolen goods, as somebody once said and I do agree with JD that the Conservatives were out early saying this was going to be their focus, and the Liberals have tailored their campaign to it. The problem for the Conservatives is that they've said that they're going to balance the books as well, which obviously limits the amount of money they can spend, unless they're going to cut services to the bone, which then opens the door to comparisons with Doug Ford.
Are they in a bit of a box here with this narrative?
They are in a bit of a box, and so their platform will be poured over very closely. This thing, it was funny, I was just reading it and Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who came on my playlist. And it reminded me of the 2015 platform, which, if you look back at it, does not hold up so well. I mean, the modest deficits over 4 years and back into balance by now has obviously not happened. They always had this thing where they could say, well, we've got this fiscal anchor of the debt to GDP ratio, the amount of debt compared to the size of the economy, and it was always going to be ticking downwards. Now they are stretching that to breaking point in this thing. I think some of the numbers look to be a little bit innovative, to say the least.
In fact, we heard from the parliamentary budget officer, we heard from Kevin Page in our program saying that these some of these revenue measures they've put in, which largely consist of taxes, luxury taxes, taxes on corporations,
but also some spending cuts, which
have a high uncertainty risk around them. So there's
no kidding.
It would seem there's a good chance they won't meet those.
But they had to have those numbers there because otherwise that debt to GDP number does not tick down, and it only ticks down by 0.5% over 4 years. Which means that if there's any shock to the economy, any slowdown in growth or a recession, then they're in trouble and their fiscal anchor has just been blown away.
Yeah, I would say that this platform is a bit of a gamble because if you look at, I like to talk about the Blue Liberals, that is part of the coalition of the Liberal Party. You've got those who favor more activist government and those who are on the right side of the spectrum, political spectrum. The Blue Liberals like John Manley, even Paul Martin, I don't think they would be comfortable with that kind of platform because there's no end of deficit in sight, and that may cause the Liberals to lose some support.
It's the first Liberal platform that does not seem to me to talk about growing the economy.
Yeah, in fact, there's not been a whole lot of that discussion in the whole, by anybody in the whole campaign.
Another thing that's really striking about the platform is how much of their plan or their vision, such as it is, rests on the help from other people. Can't have a pharmacare program until there's the provinces. There's so many things that are sort of to be announced or to be negotiated too, which is interesting because I watched Trudeau yesterday talking about you're going to have a tough negotiator across from Doug Ford, but Doug Ford can negotiate tough back, right? So, yeah, it struck me. I found myself missing Stephen Harper's 5 big things. You know that we used to have platforms that were about something, but there's no 5 big things in this platform.
Has there been a big idea in the campaign?
No. Yeah, and the Conservatives haven't done it either. There isn't. There's sort of little bits and pieces of things here and there.
Back to the boutique tax cut thing and credits
and you'll recall the one promise of the 5 big things that Harper promised: healthcare, lower the waiting list for healthcare. Right. He couldn't accomplish because it needed help from
Very
friends.
quickly, Jay.
Yeah, Mr. Trudeau announced the platform yesterday in Mississauga, and he mentioned the name Doug Ford many times. He seems to be running against Doug Ford. Well, Doug Ford is running Ontario, but he's not running the rest of Canada. He's not running Quebec, so he doesn't speak to voters in Quebec when he talks about Doug Ford.
No, but to John's point, it seems to me like that's
coming up at the doors.
Well, it's setting the seed for that narrative that he can. Once we see the Conservative costed platform, and to John's point earlier, there's only going to be a couple of options. And one of the first questions that Andrew Scheer you can expect to get, right? Okay, well, what are you going to cut to balance the books? And then that reanimates the Doug Ford conversation.
And let's face it, Ontario is so important seat-wise. When the Conservatives are at 35% in Ontario, they're winning 35 seats out of the however many there are, 121. When they're at 44, as they were in 2011 with Harper, they won 70 plus. That's the big swing in 5 percentage points.
It's a big hill to climb. With let's talk a little bit about. Okay, so we're at the halfway point of the campaign. What are your thoughts on what we've seen so far? And John, let me start with you. And what do you think the campaign's been about? What do you think it'll be about for the final 3 weeks?
Well, I mean, it is a bit of a Seinfeld campaign. It's not really been about anything. I mean, they've made little boutique. So I was with Scheer for 2 weeks, so I think I'll speak to that. But little boutique cuts here and there, which cumulatively they're hoping will say people will look at it and go, well, that's going to save me X dollars, and that's for me. I think Scheer's run a pretty flawless campaign so far. If that's your goal, it's a pretty modest goal, to be honest. I mean, it's not doesn't inspire people, but he's been cautious, and he's not made any big mistakes, and he's relied on his opponent to make mistakes, and he's made a couple. So we'll see in the debates how that goes.
Susan?
Yeah, I went door to door last week in Toronto. And the people knew that there was an election going on there, but everyone had a different issue at the door.
Right.
Nobody knows, as John says, what this election is about. I find myself writing, and I've got to stop it, because I keep writing what this election isn't about. I'll just raise it. In my house, anyway, we're equally riveted to what's going on in the United States. I find it odd that we're having an election proximate to what is, Donald Trump, and serious challenges to democracy around the world. He has had a huge effect on Canada. It has been the single biggest preoccupation of this government in the last 4 years, and we aren't having a conversation about Canada-U.S. relations. We're not talking about democracy.
That's a fair point. It's a lot about what the campaign's not about.
Yeah.
Joël-Denis, final thought to you.
The national campaign has not been inspiring for voters, I would say. So that means that local campaigns, regional campaigns, may have a bigger impact this time than the national leaders in the choice of voters. And I think so. So you will see maybe candidates winning on their own instead of having the help usually they get from the inspiration they get from the leaders.
All right, well, we'll see what we get the next 3 weeks. Thank you all.